Hey folks, I'm Mark Ryan. This is Super Review, and this is the Simgot EM6L. So this is a new hybrid IM from the brand Simgot, and it's kind of interesting that this company, I don't know, I reviewed one of their IMs a long time ago, and then I just didn't hear anything about them for a long time. But this year they've had the EA500, which made a bit of a splash. There's the EA200 or the EW200, the EA2000. I don't know. They've got a bunch of different models. I think their model names could use some work, frankly. But here we've got the EM6L, which is not doing much better than those others in terms of model names. But in terms of what the IM is, well, let's talk about it. So unlike those other Simgot IMs, this one is a hybrid. All right, so it's got one dynamic driver for the bass and low end, and then it's got, I believe, 4 balanced armatures to cover the mid-range and the top end. And while the price on this one was a little bit higher than some of those others, I think it is coming in at $110, but I think $110 is actually pretty in line with what you should expect to pay for kind of an entry-level 4-5 driver hybrid. And that's what we've got here. So yeah, I guess we'll do a little bit of talking about the build, the fit, and then I will get into describing the sound. So let's just dive into talking about the build. And the build on this IM is, I would say, is okay. It doesn't blow me away, but it's, you know, it's pretty nice for the price. I think $110 is certainly a fair price for it. The materials that you have are kind of like this plastic shell here on the outside, and I can't tell if it's like a solid resin. I think it might be, but it's not see-through really at all, so you can't see anything inside there. I'm not complaining about that. I'm just kind of pointing it out. But then you do have a metal shell here on the outside. Hear that? That's right. We got some metallic ping there, which is what we like to see. But yeah, I don't know, kind of plain looking. But I think where the build on this thing mostly, I don't want to say lets me down is a little bit of an overstatement, but just leaves me a little unimpressed is in terms of the fit. So I'll do a fit demonstration for you as I try to maneuver here toward the camera. I mean, fit and comfort is fine. There's no sharp edges or anything on the EM6L. And as you saw, the ingress egress is perfectly fine. It's not like an etymotic deep fit or anything like that. But I think where this thing is a little bit lacking in terms of fit is in, well, this area, fit stability. Okay, as you can see, this is not like particularly well molded to my ear. I would say that fit stability is a little bit below average, maybe even a bit on the poor side. It kind of reminds me of a lot of the way that like Letsure IMs fit, which it's not terrible. It just means that you're probably going to have to do a bit of tip rolling in order to find the tip that's going to give you the most stability. Here I am using SpinFit CP 360s. That's what I found that worked out for me in terms of giving it the most fit stability. Now you might see kind of a side effect of this metal panel here is that it is quite fingerprint prone. Now, because it's dark, most of the time I don't see it, to be honest, but here under light, obviously, it's looking a little nasty. So I hope you'll pardon me for that. Apart from the earpieces themselves, which again, I think are okay, there is the cable. And to be honest, I actually really like this cable, apart from one feature, which I will mention in a bit. But the cable is just nice, light, and thin. As you can see, the behavior on it is quite good. It is soft, it's pliable, it's not stiff. And we will do a little bit of a roadie wrap here so you can try and roadie wrap it on my little itty bitty table here so you can see what it looks like. Sorry for all the noise, but we're making do with this space. Yeah, just generally a pretty nice little cable. It's even got like a functional chin slider. It stays in place pretty well. And you've got your standard 3.5 millimeter connector, which is what I like to see. Now, the one thing that I will complain a little bit about, and I have seen some other complaints about this, which is actually somewhat surprising, just because I don't know that I've been too keenly aware of the blowback against this, but it's this connector. So it's like a QDC style connector. You can see when I take it's a 2-pin cable, right? It is kind of a standard-ish 2-pin connector, but it does have this protrusion on it, which means that, well, one, this cable is only going to fit onto IMs that also have this protrusion. And then two, you can definitely put a non-protruded or a non-QDC style connector on here, but it's just going to make it extra tall and kind of lanky and awkward. It's interesting with these 2-pin connectors. I actually think that, at least in theory, this is probably like the ideal preferred 2-pin connector. Because it does add a little bit of stability and prevent the pins from having any like sort of torsional force or anything on them that could cause them to be damaged. But The biggest issue with those is just that they're not standard. So because they're not standard, it just means that this IM is going to be compatible with fewer cables out there, or it's going to work with them, but it's just going to look a little bit awkward. And it also means that this really nice cable, I'm unfortunately not going to be able to put onto one of my other IMs, which is a shame. But I guess that will lead us into talking about the sound here on the EM6L. And like I've been doing, let's just go ahead and start by taking a look at what it looks like on a measurement. So this is on squig.link. If you want to check it out right now, squig.link. I've got it linked in the description as well. But yeah, this is a frequency response. And if you know my preferences, this should be looking pretty good to you. So this dotted line back here is basically my preference. It's kind of my neutral target. And what you can see here in the frequency response is more or less what I hear, which is to say it's kind of got like a neutral mid-rangey sound, but it's turned up a little bit, right? It's got a little bit of extra excitement on either end. So you've got a bit of bass emphasis here down below 150 hertz. And I think that is reasonably well low, that you're not going to have to worry about that bass emphasis resulting in like muddiness or soupiness or anything like that. It's not that at all. If anything, the sound in this IM honestly comes across more bright and lively and thin, maybe a little bit thin, not like super thin, but it kind of reminds me of the Soft Ears Studio 4 in terms of its tonal balance. And I think a lot of that is coming from, I guess, this slight excess of, let's say, 3K to about 8K. You know, I know it doesn't really look like a lot on a graph, but I will say that in listening experience, it definitely is adding a pretty significant bit of excitement and contrast. And again, yeah, it just feels a little bit turned up versus my typical neutral target, which in this price range, like I guess the Truth Ear Hexa is kind of my frame of reference. And so as I'm describing this thing as being a little bit turned up, I'm kind of describing it that way in contrast to the Truth Ear Hexa, which we'll talk a little bit more about how these things compare in a bit. But yeah, and just generally, you've got pretty well smooth treble. You know, a lot of the times you're probably used to seeing like a peak around here at 8K. I'm guessing that Simgot is doing something to intentionally subvert that peak and prevent it from popping in its head. But yeah, just overall does result in, I would say, a pretty smooth treble experience. Now, to my ear, what does the EM6L actually sound like? So mostly exactly that. But I think, all right, what are sort of the standout characteristics of the sound? It is a little bit more exciting than my typical neutral. You could even maybe describe it as like a very mild V-shaped sound signature, but very mild because it's still very much mid-rangey. If you're into vocal content, I think you're going to like the tuning here on the EM6L. I would also say that just that little bit of extra brightness on it contributes to, I would say, a wider sense of stereo width than you get on something like the Truth Ear Hexa. And I do actually have the Hexa here. Let me pull it in. Oh, that's not on camera. I actually pulled in my Truth Ear Hexa just to do a bit of head-to-head comparisons. And yeah, definitely in listening experience, this thing sounds a little bit wider, a little bit more exciting, a little bit more, if you're looking for that stereo imaging and even more distinct positioning and stuff like that, I think that the EM6L does a pretty good job at that. Where I think the EM6L is a little bit weak is in terms of the incisiveness of its treble, which is interesting because as we saw, there is actually, you know, a fair bit of excess kind of in that lower treble, which is typically where I attribute that sense of bite and incisiveness. And I do find that the treble in this just comes across a little bit soft, especially in the attack, which can also contribute to a somewhat soft and pillowy bass response. Maybe, I don't know. It's interesting because you look at it on a graph and it looked really like they've done it perfectly well. But listening to it, it's not bad. It's just, it lacks a little bit of that physicality and punch behind it. But yeah, generally a pretty exciting little sound. Let me check my notes real quick to make sure, see if there was anything else I wanted to say. I mean, I'll just pull in the Hexa just for a little bit more of a direct comparison, even though most of this review has kind of been describing this thing in relation to the Hexa. I think if you're choosing between these two, right, and they're priced similarly, the Hexa is cheaper. It's $80 versus $110, but they're priced similarly. They're both hybrids, and I think if you're looking for a hybrid in this price range, these are probably two of my favorite. I definitely like this better than something like the Kiwi Ears Quartet, which I reviewed a while ago. But I think with the EM6L, you're getting a more impressive stereo width, but trading the more impressive micro contrast and texturing that you get here on the Truth Ear Hexa. I think also in terms of tuning response, again, the EM6L is maybe a little bit, index is a little bit higher on that excitement factor, whereas the Hexa, I think, is a little bit more warm, a little bit more laid back versus the EM6L. But yeah, I think that's about as much as I gotta say about this earphone. It's pretty solid. Out of 5 stars, I'm gonna go ahead and give the EM6L, I think, very solid 4 stars. And if you're interested in checking this thing out, of course, I've got it linked in the description down below. Shout out to Simgot, actually, for reaching out to me and sending this in for review. Yeah, if you want to check it out, got it linked down below. Also got links to Squiglink, where you can look at the measurements for yourself, or join me on Discord, which I've also got linked in the description down below. I'm not doing live streams still for another like month and a half or so, which is a little bit regrettable. But if you want to continue the conversation and the chat, I am on Discord, probably way too much, but it's a good place to catch up and also just catch up with the wider community, which has got a bunch of people that are surprisingly knowledgeable, nice, easy to talk to, and I think a lot of fun. Anything else I wanted to say? I guess I'll just quick note that CanJam SoCal is coming up in just a few weeks, and I'm actually planning to be there. So if you're planning to be at CanJam SoCal, leave a comment down below letting me know. And I would actually, again, double recommend joining us on the Discord server. We've got a room dedicated to CanJam SoCal, and we'll probably be discussing potential meetup. Well, there's not really a potential. There's going to be a meetup of some sort. So yeah, if you want to join, hit us up on Discord. Otherwise, I'll catch you on the next super review. Have a good one. Cheers.